Geek Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Deconstructing the Beatles. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
And, this is the end, beautiful friend.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The fuck was that?
Oh, no. I was coughing.
It was kind of like cusp of like mid-orgasm, but you don't want it to happen. You're like, oh, no!
Not yet! Not all of us. Not both of us!
Yeah, but this is we are now.
It's a depressing album.
It's a pretty, especially what it symbolizes. It really is the beginning of the end, because the late period Beatles, even though the Yellow Submarine comes out in the middle of late period Beatles, it was recorded months before the White Album. And the White Album really signals the beginning of the end for the Fab Four, the four boys from Liverpool.
Yeah.
John Lennon and the Silver Beatles.
Yeah. Johnny Moondogs.
Yeah. The Quarrymen.
Yeah.
Rory and the Hurricanes.
Oh, that's right.
The Beatles.
And just real quick, speaking of the Beatles, just in case, I feel like some people actually don't know this, and this isn't a slight on anybody. We like to be educational here. The White Album is actually called The Beatles.
It's a self-titled album,
Yeah,
but everybody just calls it The
White
Beatles.
Album. Yeah, The White Album. Yeah. The White yeah. It's a self-titled album, but everybody calls it The Beatles.
What if somebody put out like an album and it was titled self-titled?
The Beatles. I'm waiting for a band to come out with their first album called Greatest Hits.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, Dream Theater had a compilation album called Greatest Hit and 21 other pretty cool songs too, because they only had one hit.
One
Pull Me
true
Under.
hit, yeah.
Anyway, no, it is called The Beatles, but it's known as the White Album.
Yes.
That's the best thing ever.
Because the album cover is completely white and just says The Beatles.
The Beatles.
In very small letters. It's a double album. Does it have to be a double album?
No.
And we're going to go
If Paul
over...
McCartney's around here, I'll say yes. But if he's not, I'll say no.
If Paul McCartney is here, I would probably say no and get called out on it. Like apparently all my other interactions with Beatles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of filler on this.
Mm-hmm.
You might have noticed in the episode title, this is The White Album Part 1, because it's a double album. We're not going to talk about all 30 tracks.
Yeah.
Along with the background of the album. The majority of it was written while the band was in India in March and April of 1968, studying transcendental meditation under Maharishi Yogi. Or is it Yogi Maharishi? I don't really know. I should.
Yeah.
It's not like I do research for this, but I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We said both of them, so one of them's right.
Yes, both those words are there.
Yeah.
They're just maybe not in the right order.
Yeah, who knows?
But it was really, George Harrison had previously gone to India in like 1967. He basically came back and was like, guys, you have to come back to India with me. And at that point, Lennon was kind of feeling the pressures of fame, so he was like, yeah, totally, let's do it. And McCartney was like, well, I'm with John. And Ringo was just like, well, I don't want to be the odd man out. Though
Sure.
Ringo was only there for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he's like, in Ringo's eyes, he only saw it as like an extended vacation.
Sure.
And he was like, cool. And then all the other Beatles leave in April because they feel that there's rumors that the Yogi is doing something inappropriate, which gets referenced in a song on this album that Lennon writes. But, one of the edicts was, you didn't come here to work on music, so don't work on music. But Lennon and McCartney can't help themselves. This is the last really prolific songwriting period between the two of them. They would write songs in their private time and compare them at night when everyone else was asleep. And so a lot of the songs that show up on the White Album come from this period. You've also really, it's that time away from Yoko, because Lennon meets Yoko Ono, the woman that would become his second wife. He meets her at an art exhibit of hers in 1966. They kind of, at the time, John's married Cynthia Lennon, his first wife. But it's when he's separated from Yoko, when he's in India, because Cynthia comes along to India with him. But when he's separated from Yoko, he starts up a kind of a correspondence with her, like pen pals, and he starts to realize that he misses her, and he starts to realize that they're more than just friends. Like, this is a woman he's like, she's on my intellectual level, if not even higher. This is where he realizes he falls in love with Yoko.
Yeah, it's real love. It's true love.
Yeah.
Did you know what the art exhibit was that won him over?
It was a ladder, wasn't it?
It was a ladder that when you climbed up at the top, it said yes. And he goes, if it said no, that would have been it. You just a lot of you climbed up on the top and said yes. And I think that started it all for them, and as we get closer to the actual end of the Beatles, I'm sure we'll talk about Yoko a little more, but I feel like she takes a lot of unnecessary heat.
I don't, for the record, we can go talk about what broke up the Beatles. I think Yoko was maybe a factor, but she's not the factor.
No, she's definitely not the factor. I mean, that's something that just something a line that somebody said and then it stuck.
Yeah.
Me personally, I think the death of Brian Epstein is the start of it. That's
the death of their manager. Yes,
that's the snowball that just can't be stopped.
Yeah,
because
after that, George and John's heart just isn't in anymore.
Yeah, and you can't fault a guy for finding the love of his life.
Yeah, and I think the Beatles had from the beginning had a kind of this unwritten rule, like no wives, girlfriends, whoever in the recording studio while they're recording. John realizes he's in love with Yoko Ono, and so he wants to spend all his time with her, and so she starts to hang out with him during the White Album sessions. Not to be undone, Patty Boyd starts coming in and sits in with her husband George during the White Album sessions. Maureen is sitting in the White Album sessions. Ringo Starr's wife. Linda eventually is sitting in on they meet during their Linda Eastman, Paul McCartney's first wife. They meet during the White Album sessions, and of course it's quite the whirlwind romance.
It is, yeah.
They get married pretty soon after, but no, I mean this is where the Beatles start to basically build the families that will take them outside of the Beatles.
Yeah, interesting.
Also, this is something envisioned by Brian Epstein. They found Apple Corps right after they get back from India. Yeah. And
bringing business into it.
They do, because they need a tax shelter, because as George Harrison's tax man on Revolver points out, they're getting charged like a 95% tax because they're among Britain's super wealthy, and there's a super tax against the wealthy at the time. So they set up this tax shelter, which they had previously explored with their publishing company, Northern Songs, and it becomes clear without Brian Epstein's guiding influence, they are no good at being businessmen.
It's a snowball, just getting bigger.
And they're pooling millions of dollars together. Apple Corps is floundering, but this is the album. The White Album is the album that's meant to basically launch Apple Corps. Granted, there had been like Music from Wonderwall by George Harrison first, and Two Virgins by by John Lennon and Yoko Ono had been both released before the White Album, because the White Album goes on. They record the White Album most of 1968. It finally comes out in October of 68, with like weeks after the album is sequenced and mixed. So it was quite. There was a quick turnaround on the final process of it, but they're recording this album for the better part of 1968. They're starting to pool millions of dollars together. Their business is floundering, and when that happens, you're starting to point fingers. They're trying to assign new managers because none of them, basically everybody. Paul McCartney wants his future brother-in-law to be the new manager of the Beatles. None of the other Beatles want that. Obviously, they're like, well, he's got a vested interest in you.
Yeah.
They want Alan Klein, the manager of the Rolling Stones. But Paul, and this isn't just Paul not getting his way. Paul's heard some, because we know that some shifty shit happens between Alan Klein and the Rolling Stones years down the line.
Yeah, it comes back to haunt him in a big bad way.
Yeah, they're like, he doesn't want Alan Klein.
Yeah.
So that's where we start to see, once you start to mix business into it, man.
Yeah.
And they're already starting to grow apart.
It's no good.
Yeah, so this is really the beginning of the end, and we'll go into it track by track as we kind of explore that. And I think you can see that from the first two songs on the album, because you know who's drumming on those first two songs? Not Ringo Starr.
That's right, it's Paul McCartney.
Mostly Paul McCartney. Apparently, Lennon and Harrison also contributed drums to the album opener back in the USSR, but from what I understand, the greatest drummer outside of Ringo in the Beatles was Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
So he really does the heavy lifting there. I mean, back in the USSR, I love it. It's a great track. It's a fantastic way to open up the album. It was kind of a loving parody of the Beach Boys back in the USA, because Mike Love of the Beach Boys was actually studying transcendental meditation with the Beatles in India at the same time. And of course, Paul McCartney and John Lennon are friends with Brian Wilson of Beach Boys fame. So there's definitely a mutual respect there, and kind of as a joking nod, Paul McCartney writes back in the USSR.
Supposedly when Brian Wilson heard it, like the Beach Boys influence, his quote was, "That's cute." You know what I mean? But yeah, I love Back in the USSR. I think it's a real like just some of my favorite Harrison work.
Oh,
It's not necessarily complicated. And again, we've said this from the first episode on. Harrison's it's not about being complicated. It's about being what's right for the song. And there's that trill kind of alternate picking in the last verse that is just it's so fast it sounds like one single note, and it's just the same note over and over again, and it's just wonderful. They're all rocking on this track. Again, McCartney, really, as far as I'm concerned, is the de facto drummer on the song.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees that even though they're like, well, it's not. People will agree that the second track is entirely McCartney.
Definitely.
There's a little more debate about how much drums is McCartney in Back in the USSR, but the general consensus is that at least most of the drums here is McCartney.
I mean, it's pretty standard, pretty solid, but it's exactly what you need.
The big reason Ringo leaves is because, things are tense between the band. There's this tension. Like, Lennon would once say that he would go up to, like, George during the White Album sessions, a month or several weeks in, was just like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And George was like, I'm trying to, I was going to ask you the same. Like, they would basically confer with each other, like, what the fuck's, like, what's the bad juju in the room, And, it gets to a point where McCartney criticizes Ringo's drumming so bad that Ringo, quits the band. He goes off to holiday in Greece with Peter Sellers for 2 weeks, which is where he writes Octopus's Garden.
That's right.
But, the Beatles beg him to come back, and George decorates his drum kit with flowers upon his arrival. But, apparently, McCartney was really critical of Ringo's drumming on these first two songs, especially Back in the USSR, which is why Ringo just is like, fuck it,
Yeah.
Because at this point, he's over it.
Yeah, which is funny because that's kind of, excuse me, that's kind of vintage perfectionist McCartney, where he'll just run you out of the recording studio and then just do it himself. I don't know of like really any other stories where that happens, but again, these guys have known each other for years and years and have reached the top of the charts and the top of Everest here. But yeah, he's a man not to be messed with. In the third act Beatles,
he has at this point he has the confidence within the band, and he's, to his credit, he's doing most of the heavy lifting to keep the band together.
Yeah,
without their manager. At this point, he's got really starting with Revolver, he gets a very clear vision of what he wants, and hell or high water, he's going to get that sound.
Yeah, and
this is no exception. But it's a fun one.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Like I said, I think the instrumentation is the standout. I think the lyrics are really clever. When McCartney finally played over in Russia for the first time, this is the first track he played, live. I think it's like McCartney in Red Square or something like that. I have that DVD somewhere, but it's it's great. It's just a great. And on all the different things we talk about with music, Kiss or the Beatles or whatever, we're all suckers for great opening tracks, and this is a great one.
Indeed. Yeah, the second one, which is also just about entirely drummed by McCartney, is actually a Lennon number, though.
Oh, man.
It's my sister's favorite Beatles song. This is my sister's favorite Beatles album, actually. And the second song is her favorite Beatles song of all time. It's Dear Prudence.
It's fantastic. It's one of the best.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that basically Mia Farrow... There's a lot of apparently famous people that were studying Transcendental Meditation at the ashram in India at the same time as the Beatles and Mike Love. Mia Farrow, actress from like Rosemary's Baby and that sort of thing. I guess Rosemary herself in that film was studying there with her sister Prudence Farrow. Unless they have some cool last name I don't know, or maybe not cool last name. I don't really fucking know. Either way, her sister Prudence is studying Transcendental Meditation down there with them, and she's like so dedicated to it that she's just meditating in her room away from everybody else all the time. And Lennon kind of gets a little worried, about her. So using a finger-picking playing style he learns from Donovan, who's also studying Transcendental Meditation down there, Donovan being Paul McCartney's neighbor and the guy that did Mellow Yellow in the 60s, he writes Dear Prudence, which is a song like literally begs, won't you come out to play,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a very beautiful, gentle song. And you've got that really cool, this is a good balance, I think, between acoustic, because it's primarily acoustic, but then you've got Harrison coming in with this, with this kind of fuzzed out electric guitar sound that really complements it too. It's a really beautiful song.
It is, and I love the finger picking that you were talking about, Sam. The acoustic stuff from Lennon, I think, really went on to inspire Roger Waters a lot with the Pink Floyd stuff that he would do, especially acoustic playing and in his solo work. And Paul's drumming, man, is fantastic, especially during the outro.
Yeah, no, and it's a finger picking style. It's like a descending D, like it's a D, then it's a D add C, D add B. Yeah, it's a very, apparently Lennon knocked out the main guitar part on one take, because it's not that complex, but the beauty's in the simplicity, and I think that's a big key for me in the White Album. A lot of my favorite songs on the White Album, I mean, there's a few exceptions, like While My Guitar Gently Weeps can get a little complex, but I think with the White Album they were trying to Lennon and Harrison felt that Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper's were both a little too overproduced, so they wanted to put a little more heart into it. You see a lot of of Harrison's kind of blues influence in there, and at this time Lennon's taking cues from the Rolling Stones, who are really coming into their own right by 1968.
Oh yeah,
this is the year they put out Beggar's Banquet. This is the year, the following year they put out Let It Bleed. They've already put out Satisfaction. They've already put out Jumpin' Jack Flash and all that. So, and of course, Lennon would always pal around with Keith Richards and by extension Mick Jagger. And so I think you see a lot of influence. This is the closest John Lennon gets to being a Rolling Stone.
I think just overall.
Not this song, but on the sound.
Yeah. Overall, yeah. I mean, whether the other Beatles knew it or not, this is the closest the Beatles get to really sounding like the Rolling Stones.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Dear Prudence, and there's kind of, I would say, just in sound only, a kind of spiritual sequel that McCartney does on the second album or second disc, whatever you want to say. That's very similar to this that I love. Two songs equally, and Dear Prudence is a great one.
Yeah. The next song is another Lennon number. It's a fun little callback. It's Glass Onion.
Yeah. I like that he refers to other Beatles songs and The Wall Was Just Paul, and
it's very much him kind of looking. He's like, at this point we had built up enough of kind of our own mythology that I could kind of start to reference it.
Yeah.
And so he kind of he references Fixing a Hole. He references Fool on the Hill. He references Strawberry Fields. I'm going through it. Told you about Strawberry Fields. Yeah. Nothing is real. Here's another place you can go.
Everything goes.
Fixing a hole in the ocean. Yeah. Of course, the Walrus's Paul line was, everyone's like, oh, he's talking about Paul being dead.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at Magical Mystery Tour, like the album cover, the Walrus is clearly John, and people would ask Lennon about that, years down the line. He was like, "Look, it was just me kind of tipping a hat to Paul McCartney because there was a lot of changes in our relationship, and I wanted to kind of give him like a nice little nod for keeping the band together and everything." And at the time, for a period early in the White Album sessions, when Cynthia Lennon and John Lennon's marriage first breaks down. In Britain at the time, divorce courts almost always favor the mother.
Yeah.
And so Lennon, I would argue, as much as I like John Lennon, he does fucking cheat on his wife.
Yeah.
And with another woman and leaves her. He loses access to the house and everything. So he's, for a good chunk of the White Album sessions, him and Yoko are living with Paul.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure makes things all the more tense.
It doesn't go well.
No.
From some stories I've heard, but yeah, I mean, it is fun to hear a Beatle reference, kind of Beatle lore and Beatle lyrics and songs in a Beatles song.
Yeah, it's weird that like songs take on their own mythology, but at this point, the White Album. I mean, how many albums deep are we at this point? We are in it.
Yeah, we are.
So yeah, and I will say it's really weird to me. Like, it's almost kind of got like a James Bond thing with the strings.
Yep.
Yeah. Almost like a slow building menace. But then, like, when the momentum cuts out of the song, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why are you doing this?
Yeah, why don't you just...
Also, like, the fact that this album is almost 50 years old
50 years and 2 years.
is fucking nuts to me.
I mean, this year, in, a week after this thing posts, Revolver turns 50.
Yeah. I mean, again, all the Beatles stuff just doesn't really sound dated. I mean, some of the early stuff does, but like, not dated, but you can tell. But yeah, I mean, the fact that like, for me, White Album is an album that I don't think can ever sound dated, because as much as people kind of, I don't know, I feel like some people don't like this album, some people are kind of so with this album. I really like the album. I mean, there's definitely misses in it,
yeah.
But I think you get to see some of the Beatles in their truest form and truest music sense with the tracks, because it really is just a solo album from all the Beatles put together.
It really, even though it's ostensibly it's the only self-titled Beatles album, it's the
farthest from it.
Yeah, they're at some points in the album, they're each in separate studios recording different things.
Yeah,
the sense of unity and camaraderie that had been present, like with Yellow Submarine, like we were mentioning in the last episode, has just evaporated. And I think they can tell, because they try to course correct with Get Back, and that doesn't really work. But we'll save that one. we'll talk about that. But no, I mean, Glass Onion's great. Outro goes a little too long, but I love songs that kind of poke at the mythology a bit, because
it would be Lennon who would do that. He's the only Beatle I think that would ever really think about doing that.
Yeah,
Harrison maybe, but Lennon definitely.
Yeah, he's kind of like, he isn't afraid of looking behind the curtain.
Sure.
Now the next song is, I feel like it's one of the more notable songs off this album. It's it's Obla Di Obla Da.
Oh yeah,
by McCartney. Apparently he had originally, because reggae is starting to make inroads at the UK at this time, so he originally writes this kind of like slower, funkier reggae number, which you can hear on the anthology, and they spend he's determined to make this song a single. And when McCartney's determined, like Maxwell Silverhammer down the line, they'll spend fucking weeks on it.
Yeah. Well, the difference with the anthology version, I think, is superior, because it's just they're still having fun with it. Is Lennon? It wasn't Lennon. It's like, I Dig a Pygmy by Charles Hawtrey. No, that's on Let It Be.
Yeah.
There's another thing he shouts off, random craziness that's hilarious, but they kick right into it and they're just jamming.
Yeah.
It just sounds more fresh. This is also the famous song that McCartney does it for so long that he screws the lyrics up.
Oh, yeah.
And they've recorded, like Sam said, just over and over, to the point of Harrison lying on the ground just fucking losing his mind. And
it was this session that made George Martin temporarily leave the sessions to go on an impromptu vacation, and for Jeff Emmerich to quit.
Yeah.
Because while they're in one of the lengthy retakes of Obla Di Obla Da, George Martin, kind of criticizes Paul McCartney on some of his vocals on one of the takes, and McCartney's like, "Well, why don't you come down here and do it?"
It's such a child.
And George Martin's like, "I'm going to go on a fucking vacation for 2 weeks," and Jeff Emmerich's like, "I'm not going to work with you guys." I mean, they bring him back into the fold for Abbey Road with the promise that they won't be as bitchy.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, he's out for the rest of the White Album sessions, and he's out for all of the Get Back sessions. And he had been their sound engineer since Revolver.
Yeah. It's Desmond and Molly.
Desmond and Molly Jones.
Yeah. So Desmond, he screws up and says, Desmond takes her, whatever, puts her makeup on. And he realizes that he's saying that Desmond in the female part. And they play it back for him, and he goes, "Fuck it. He's a transvestite." Next song. And so that's a great fun little track you can hear in there. And I've always wondered, and I've seen him twice, and I always forget to remember if he does this. When he sings it live, if he keeps that in there or not. Yeah. I can't remember. But I don't know. That's just always a fun thing. I always like that the fact that they played it for so long, they still got it wrong, and they kept it on there because they were losing their minds over it. Again, like Sam said,
it was Lennon that came up with what ended up being the final tempo. Because after weeks of this, he comes in one morning high as a kite, apparently, and he's just like, "Not like that, like this," and does the rapid fire piano intro, the dun 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 dun, and that's where they gets the final tempo from.
Yep. But, no, it's a good sing along, and it's fun.
Yeah, despite the troubled history, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fun.
It's a fun song.
We'll probably like it because we didn't have to play it over and over again for weeks.
Yeah, God, jeez. But the next song is a prime example of a filler track on this album. It's "Wild Honey Pie" by Paul McCartney.
Honey pie.
There's a song.
Honey pie.
there's a song later on the album just called Honey Pie.
Yeah.
And while McCartney's fucking around in the studio one day, he just comes up, he starts just like wildly saying Honey Pie while like playing whatever, I guess a harpsichord. And according to him, the only reason they kept it in was because Patty Boyd liked the song.
Yep.
Part of me is like, would McCartney have just kept it in?
Yeah. I mean, there's not much to say because it's just literally
for 52 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just McCartney wailing Honey Pie while playing instruments.
I love you. So that's it.
I could do without the next song too, if I'm to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
It's the first Lennon song where I'm like, maybe get out of here. Mm-hmm. It's the continuing story of Bungalow Bill.
So Captain Marvel zapped him right between the eyes. All the children sing. It's a jam, man. It's a jam.
Would you keep it?
I would. I think it's a fun jam. The fact that he references Captain Marvel is funny.
That's pretty sweet. That's pretty. I do love Captain Marvel.
Yeah, and he's not calling him Shazam.
Yeah.
You also get Yoko.
In face, it looks so clear.
Looks so fierce.
Looks so fierce.
Looks so fierce.
Here's the thing. I've heard this song I don't know how many times.
Mm-hmm.
I can never keep a straight face when Yoko chimes in with that.
Well, it's out of fucking nowhere, and it's kind of unsettling. Again, all the wives sing on this album, not on this track, but on this album.
You would think it was a joke singer, like somebody putting on a voice,
or like Lennon putting on a voice, like you know my name, look up the number,
and then you find out it's Yoko Ono.
It's Yoko Ono, and you're like, okay,
she's trying.
I think I like Lennon's enthusiasm on this song.
Okay,
it's not a favorite of mine by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that I misquoted Yoko shows you how much I think of the Yoko line. Yeah. It's a weird little moment. I guess it's a interesting Beatles moment, to have Yoko, singing for the first time or wailing. But I think
you could listen to two versions if you want to hear that.
Oh boy! But I think it's
don't. You'll have to see the album cover.
And
if you see the album cover, that means you've seen John Lennon's penis.
Yeah, the innocence is lost.
Paradise Lost, the John Lennon story.
Yeah. It's a fun jam. That's all I got to say about that, And they reference Captain Marvel.
Yeah. It was written by Lennon in reference to there was some rich tycoon that was studying transcendental meditation with him in India. Like apparently fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Apparently like all of the UK and American entertainment industry figures are fucking there at the same time. No wonder they wanted to get the hell out. And he went like tiger hunting. And he was like, "Oh, I took out a tiger," and Lennon was like, "Oh, good for you."
Yeah.
And writes the continuing story of Bungalow Bill.
Good for fucking you.
The next song is possibly the greatest song on this side. Remember, double album, so 4 sides. Certainly, I would argue the greatest Harrison song on this album. It's "While My Guitar Gently Weeps."
Oh, I thought it was "Cry Baby Cry." No, I thought it was Savoy Truffle. What was it?
Savoy
Truffle.
Savoy
Truffle. Savoy Truffle. But you have to have the tangerine. Tangerine. So can I sing? Pineapple. Anyway, that sounds.
We'll get to that.
It's a jam. I'll give it that. I like a tasty jam, but no, "While My Guitar Gently Weeps." I mean, come on. I sang this in front of my school once.
Oh.
We did, me and my buddy Chris Lee, who's a fantastic guitar player in the band Mugatu. Check him out. But he played lead, and I played rhythm and sang "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and we did the unplugged version of Layla. And so we always joked in high school, because we did the 4 years of guitar at Centerville High School, that he was Eric Clapton and I was George Harrison, because we were best friends throughout high school, and those were favorite guitar players. And, he loved Clapton stuff, I loved the Beatles stuff. So it was kind of perfect that we played that track together. That was always one of my favorite high school moments is when we did that. But it's great, man. I mean, it's super confident Harrison. Just the title itself is a fantastic, and the fact that Clapton plays on this track.
Clapton's the lead guitarist on "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and originally he was like, nobody plays guest guitar on "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and Harrison was like, look, you're my friend, you're a great guitarist, and I want you on it, and if the other people don't like it, they can fucking deal with it.
And it put Paul on his best behavior.
Yeah, because Harrison would later reflect, like, if you want everybody to calm down, bring in a guest musician, because then nobody wants to see how bitchy you are.
Yeah, and it worked.
They later employ it, during the Get Back sessions. Perhaps too late, but they.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, And what a great fucking like riff by
Yeah.
Clapton. You know, it's a fantastic, to the point where when Harrison temporarily quits the band during the Get Back sessions, Lennon's like, well, if he isn't back by Thursday, we'll just call Clapton. You know,
Could you fucking imagine though?
that would be something. It was, you know, Paul and Ringo basically convinced John that it needed to be the classic lineup or it wouldn't be the Beatles. No,
Yeah,
I didn't say
that's-
the original lineup.
Yeah, that's right.
The,
No, but that's a smart move.
Yeah.
That really is, you know. And at the end of the day, I'm glad it happened. But just imagine that world where Eric Clapton's in the beat. I mean, he was. I mean, if you want to hear what it sounds like, listen to this song.
yeah.
Because you know, and I remember Chris would always kind of like give me like a little like elbow kind of thing, like you know, oh, the greatest lead in the Beatles was Eric Clapton, you know. And you can't necessarily argue with that, but because Clapton is such a
Yeah.
Clapton is God, as they say.
He's
But
a fantastic guitarist.
it's a great song. You know, you can't help now think about the Prince solo during the tribute, which supposedly Prince had said he had never heard the song before, and just jammed on it. But you know, it's a guitar player's song.
Yeah.
You know, and it's perfect that the guitar player in the Beatles wrote it.
Though it kind of starts out with a piano.
It does, yeah. But you know, again, just the title itself. That's such a beautiful title that I think only Harrison could have imagined.
It may be one of the greatest Harrison songs ever written. Again, certainly the best. He's got 4 songs on this album, 1 on each side.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's a standout. If not for this entire side, then just certainly for all of Harrison's 4 tracks.
Sure.
Now, closing out side 1 is another Lennon number. It was a favorite of Harrison and McCartney from the White Album sessions. It's "Happiness Is a Warm Gun."
I used to drive my brother insane with this song, because we had a room across from each other, and I used to just say, what was it, Mother Superior,
Jump
the gun. Mother Superior, jump the gun.
How many times did your brother kick your ass?
Back then he couldn't. He was smaller than me. Now he would just smack me and I'd just be dead. But he'd just look at me and I'd be dead. He'd whisper "stop" and I'd go to the other side of the moon like the Hulk. Except I wouldn't come running back saying I came for a scream.
What did Paul McCartney call you, or Paul Stanley call you again? Pudgy man?
Oh yeah, imaginary Paul Stanley moment. It's like, "Hey you, Pudgy man, shut the fuck up!" And it's just, you know, me going, "Mother Superior, for some reason, I was obsessed with that. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world when I was younger.
It's the most like sinister song, certainly on this side.
Well, it is, and again, talk about a title. You know,
apparently, George Martin was at like a dentist office, and one of the magazines, he found an American magazine in this dentist office, and it was a gun enthusiast magazine. And it was "Happiness Is a Warm Gun."
Yeah,
and Harrison, and George Martin told it to the Beatles, and John Lennon's like, "That's wild, because a warm gun means you've just shot something."
Yeah, you know, I think this is, if not one of the most progressive Beatles songs of all time, to the point where
there's 3 movements,
and the fact that Ringo couldn't play the time signature that they needed, so they just said, "You play 4/4, we'll play the other time signature." So they're doing the Dream Theater before Dream Theater, or Rush before Rush, where they're playing 2 time signatures at once. You know, they got the kind of the waltzy thing going on too. But yeah, I think this is a really cool song. I mean, this may somewhere in the back of my brain somehow been the song that really got me into like progressive music. You know, the idea that you can do something like that. I mean, the Beatles, have been progressive since day one. You know, not necessarily just having 3 different movements, 2 different time signatures at once, but just using the instrument, the studio as an instrument, all that kind of stuff. But hearing all those different movements and the different time signatures, and the fact that it's just kind of this all over the place wild jam.
And it was the big reason that I think George and Paul cited as one of their favorite songs from the White Album is because of the unusual time signatures, because of the experimental nature of the song. It required all 4 Beatles to be playing together.
I put this in the top 3 of this entire double album easily for me. Top
Is it
3,
your favorite
definitely.
Lennon number?
I'd have to run through all of them really quick.
We're about to.
We are. But I would say just right off the bat, yes. On the double album, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Dear Prudence is great too, but I think the progressive craziness of this just irks it. Just whatever. Shoots it up a little bit higher. And again, just like where While My Guitar Gently Weeps is this kind of sad, tragic title.
Almost
Happiness
Harrison
is a warm...
referencing to the band,
Yeah.
See the love there that's sleeping.
Yeah. And then the Happiness is a Warm Gun is just this sinister title.
Just and sound too. And there's a lot of both. there's both like drug and sexual undertones
There is,
or
yeah.
overtones because Mother Superior jumps the gun. It's a penis. Happiness is a warm penis.
It's a penis. You know what I got to say to that? Okay.
Okay. The other idea is like Lennon and Yoko are hooked on heroin at the time.
Yeesh. Yeah.
So warm gun, warm
Yeah.
needle.
There's all kinds of stuff going
So
on. There's a lot of stuff
I would
going on in
rather
this
have
song.
I would rather have a warm penis than a warm needle.
Okay.
Heard it here first, folks.
That's right. Well, not. Yeah, I mean, it's probably said multiple times in a Geek Out related podcast.
Actually,
but,
yeah, you're probably right. I've probably talked about.
But
anyway,
maybe on the Beatles on this episode, first time.
Of course. Now
Great track.
Great track. Closes out side one. Side two. Martha, My Dear. By
Oh,
McCartney.
I love Martha, My Dear. Granny shit at its finest.
Yeah, just like Obla Di Obla Da.
It's one of those songs where if you're not paying attention, you think it's about a woman until you realize it's about a sheepdog.
It's about, though I would argue, it's also subconsciously about Jane Asher because he's talking about her being about Martha in the song. McCartney was engaged to this girl he had been dating since '63, Jane Asher, and or '64. And they finally break up in '68 when she catches him in bed with, even though he cheated on her like the entire time. He catches her in bed with somebody. She catches her, not he catches her. She catches him
There you go.
in bed
Yeah.
with somebody else, and she's like, "Well, we're fucking done." And I think that, and then he ends up meeting his first wife, so it all works out for him.
Yeah.
But the who is not the woman she catches him with.
No.
Anyway, I think there is some subconscious element of that there too.
There probably is. McCartney obviously is an animal lover. And I think meeting Linda helps with that.
Dogs too.
With meeting Linda, of course, help with PETA and everything, and really
Sure.
meat free Mondays, all that stuff. But Martha would play a role in the front cover for his album, his DVD Paul is Live, where he's going across Abbey Road. That sheepdog is Martha.
Even all those years later,
all those years later,
because that's like 15 years later.
yeah. Unless he got
That's 25 years later.
unless he got Paul is Live.
Paul's Live is 91, isn't it?
Is it? Maybe it is. Even so,
Maybe late 80s.
yeah, he got maybe he got another.
Maybe he just likes sheep.
he just likes sheepdogs.
He probably does.
But yeah, Martha, My Dear is about his sheepdog. I'm gonna keep saying sheepdog.
yeah.
I think it's a granny shit. I think it's a good song. I think it's fun. Got the cool string McCartney with the string vocal line, all that kind of stuff. I dig it.
Granny shit, if you haven't listened to the show before, while they were recording Obla Di Obla Da, it was a term that John Lennon coined for basically any kind of like, how would you describe it other than granny shit? Almost like kind of like whimsical.
Like a whimsical 40s
yeah.
song.
He would then retroactively refer
Like-
to When I'm 64.
That's like the ultimate granny
yeah.
shit. And I love that song.
Your mother should know.
Granny shit.
Granny shit.
Martha, My Dear.
Granny shit.
Martha, My Dear isn't like super granny shit, but it's granny shit. But there is a mega granny shit song on this.
Yeah.
We're going to get to in the next episode.
Yeah.
But
And,
that's
I
fun.
mean, there's granny shits. Granny shits. Like I'm using it as, there isn't a granny shit on the Let It Be. Now that I think about it, but there's definitely granny shit on Abbey Road.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
I love granny shit.
Jake Bozick loves.
Granny shit by Paul McCartney.
The next song is kind of
Save Me.
It's yeah. It's a Lennon number. It's kind of a spiritual successor to I'm Only Sleeping off of
yeah.
Revolver. It's I'm So Tired.
Yeah.
I don't like I'm So Tired.
Oh really?
No, it's not. It doesn't do it for me.
I think it's fine. It's
I love I'm Only Sleeping. That's one of my favorite Lennon tracks.
yeah.
This one not so. It's so turgid, man. Maybe that's the point. And that was him. Like he's talking. That's another song he writes in India.
Yeah.
He's talking about how because he suffers from insomnia while he's in India. Because in his own words, he's like, "I was away from Yoko," and it's like maybe he just didn't like the food. But no. So he's suffering from insomnia in India. He writes, "I'm so tired."
Walter Rowley's such a stupid git.
Yeah.
I like Lennon's vocals when he kind of like because the cool thing about like the song that I like is that like you're right. It is the beginning, as you said, turgid, kind of like just like this humdrum kind of thing. But then it doesn't like explode into rock and roll. But Lennon does this great thing with his vocals. Like when he has a great rasp to his vocals that I think like Kurt Cobain, really liked and had really well used really well as well with like double tracking and stuff. But he does it really well in this song where he'll just kick it in to high gear where the instrumentation really doesn't get any much higher or it doesn't get any much louder or rocking. But I think it's fine. It's fine.
The next song is possibly my favorite McCartney song on the entire album. Certainly on this side. It's Blackbird, which Dave Grohl famously covered at the Academy Awards this year for the In Memoriam segment. It's a song he wrote about the Civil Rights Movement, which was, 68. So it's huge. The Martin Luther King is assassinated in 68. The Civil Rights Amendment or Civil Rights Act is passed by Johnson in 68. It's a huge year for the American Civil Rights Movement. So he writes Blackbird, you were always waiting for this moment to arrive.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's classic McCartney where you got him, a guitar, and his foot.
I've heard some people say it was just the metronome they kept in. I've also heard they mic'd up his foot.
I've always heard mic'd up the foot, and I like to think that, more.
Yeah.
So the case. I remember when I saw Springsteen live, he put a microphone by his foot to do, because he was just doing it was like a coffee house feel, except he was playing in front of like thousands of people. But, this is a Mount Rushmore McCartney song. You're putting that up there with Eleanor Rigby, I think.
Yeah.
Hey Jude, and maybe Let It Be. I don't know.
Penny
That's just
Lane.
spitballing. But Penny Lane. I mean, there's a million. That really depends who you talk to. But I think Blackbird, no matter who you talk to, should be up there. For all the reasons Sam said. 68 being this kind of,
Apparently, it was the first song. Like at this point, everybody knows because he doesn't live in a gated community or anything. McCartney's living at a flat in St. John's Wood, which is a neighborhood in London, not too far from Abbey Road Studios, actually. My grandfather used to live in St. John's Wood before the Beatles, and then moved out after and he didn't move out because of the Beatles. Anyway, he lived in St. John's Wood. So there was this group of, I guess, young Beatles fans known as the Apple Scruffs that would basically like camp out in front of Paul McCartney's house, and he was always good-natured about it. Even though at one point they broke into his house and stole some stuff.
Shit.
But we'll talk about that when we talk about Abbey Road. But,
yeah.
So
what a great song about it, though.
Yeah. The first night Linda stays over at his place in St. John's Wood, he goes out, plays Blackbird for the Apple Scruffs, and presumably goes inside and has sex with Linda McCartney. But anyway, that part of the story is not important. The important part is I
tried to hold off for as long as I could.
The important part,
so goddamn fucking nuts.
The important part is he plays Blackbird in public for the first time for the Apple Scruffs the night Linda McCartney. The first night.
Yeah, I feel like this was one of the 5 tracks he would play with Wings.
Yeah.
One of the 5 Beatles tracks.
Yeah.
Usually when he would bust this out, he'd also bust out I've Just Seen a Face.
Yeah, the Superior 5.
But basically, I mean, it's, again, look, it's fantastic. It's a defining moment for McCartney again, and he writes just kind of just a perfectly sweet little number. About something about a time where you got like Jagger writing Street Fighting Man,
Oh yeah. Street Fighting Man is also kind of a social protest song, though it's much more obviously violent.
Sure, of course, but again,
Blackbird.
Two sides of the coin kind of thing.
Yeah,
for those two guys.
There's a big difference between the Stones and the Beatles, which we'll get to in a second. But the next song is a Harrison song. It's the Harrison song for this one side. Maybe not my favorite Harrison number, but it's not it's fine if you like Baroque music. I won't even use the Baroque joke I usually do, but I'll spare you that one. But no, it's Piggies.
Ha! Yeah. Piggies.
Have you seen the little piggies in the starched white shirts? You can see them out to dinner.
Anyway, I think I should.
They're rooting dirt.
Yeah, it's
to eat the
I guess it's
bacon.
eat the bacon. Lum bum 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 bum. In
the stars with all the string, they don't care what goes on around. In the stars, they're always looking.
What they need's a damn good whacking. So that is the first technical time there's a curse word in a Beatles song, and that line was written by Harrison's mother.
Yeah. Give him a damn good whacking. Of course, Harrison's talking about like rich people, even though he himself, I guess, is rich.
Yeah.
Regardless, he's talking about how how kind of gluttonous rich people are.
I like that it's like
a reversal of Taxman.
yeah. Again, Harrison being a Monty Python guy, it's like a Monty Python thing.
Yeah, he later produces Life of Brian.
Yeah. It's again, I like it for its weirdness, but again, it's
nice harpsichord.
yeah, I do. I
like
do
that
like that.
descending harpsichord solo.
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, fine. It's fine. It's good.
The next song is probably the biggest difference of opinion between me and Jake on this album.
And I'm not just saying this to be a difference person. I like this song.
The difference people.
The difference people from Robert Redford.
Gets him the Academy Award.
Yeah, the difference people. That's probably because it was Ordinary People. The sequel to Ordinary People,
starring Timothy Hutton.
Yeah, the difference people.
And Mary Tyler Moore.
And we're gonna make it after all.
How wild must it have been to see like the Mary Tyler Moore show, and then you're like, oh, cool, she's in this movie called Ordinary People, and she's like terrible in Ordinary People, and you're like, oh, well, okay.
One day they'll make the difference people.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sam, let them know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about Rocky Raccoon by Paul McCartney.
Somewhere in the Black Mountain Hills of Dakota, there lived a young boy named Rocky Raccoon. One day his woman ran off with another guy. I'm not gonna do the whole thing, but
apparently this was a filler track too, and they just decided to keep it.
Yeah, my brother used to always find it hilarious when McCartney would sing that opening line because he's just like rushing through it and talking. My brother always thought that was really funny, and so we kind of would just do that all the time randomly. But I like genuinely love this song. I think I like McCartney's kind of jabbing at Dylan, but not really. But yes, he is.
Who was a huge influence on middle period Beatles.
Sure, and the music, it's all simple and it's all weird, and the story doesn't even really follow itself, but it's like such a great little folky thing.
Holding on Gideon's Bible.
Yeah.
Somebody, and I mentioned this on an earlier episode, asked John Lennon in an interview years later, was like, oh, did you, like, what part did you have with Rocky Raccoon? He's like, do you think I had anything to do with Rocky Raccoon?
Yeah.
You heard about that?
Yeah. But everyone knew her as Nancy. I just like, I don't know. I like that. I like when McCartney writes stories with characters, and I just like the track. I think it's a funny, weird little song.
He enjoys it. I don't. I think it's fucking garbage. Period. The end. That's all I'm going to say now about Rocky Raccoon.
Oh, Christ.
Hey, Chris, do you like Rocky Raccoon? No. That's a negative from Mr. And he's actually heard it. I've heard him listen to it. I've been in that room. The next song is the one Ringo song on this side or on this disc. It's the and he wrote it. It's his first complete songwriting credit. He gets a partial songwriting credit on "Flying on Magical Mystery Tour" because it's instrumental. And such a fucking anyway. What Goes On off of Rubber Soul. He gets a co-writing song credit with Lennon and McCartney, but. Don't Pass Me By is only credited to Richard Starkey.
It's my favorite of his two.
Yes, I will give that. This is the better of the two Ringo Starr songs on the White Album. He plays the piano on it,
Yeah.
in addition to the drums. When I saw him live, well, he played all but two of his Beatles songs live, so he definitely played this one.
Mm-hmm.
Though he didn't play the other song, he's got a solo songwriting credit for.
That feels like the more famous. Definitely is the more famous of the two.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because this is just easier to play, but he's got Todd Rundgren on the guitar.
Yeah.
Come on. Anyway, the maybe vocally it's anyway.
I don't know.
I don't know actually.
Like I said, maybe he just every night he plays like the other one.
Yeah. So I caught him on "Don't Pass Me By" night. It's a fun one. Apparently they had been sitting on this song since at least like the Rubber Soul sessions or maybe the Help sessions. Either way, I mean, it's a fun number. It's great.
One of my favorite Paul is Dead fun little things is the "you were in a car crash and you lost your hair." Because, of course, the story is that Paul McCartney was in a crash and he was decapitated, to the fucking horror of a young Jake Bozick reading this, being gullible to everything he's ever read as a young child, thinking that, how is that true? Is it true? What the hell? And then common sense reigns supreme. But no, it's fun. I mean, I like the janky, jingly little piano,
kind of like out of tune piano.
Yeah. It's got like an old Western, Western
more so than
bar.
Rocky Raccoon. God damn it!
What did that song do to you? Just it existed, I guess.
Yeah, it took up my fucking ears.
Yeah.
Not as bad as Revolution 9. We'll get
Yeah.
there next time.
Yeah.
But we've still got three more songs for this episode. 3 more songs on disc 1, side 2. The next one being "Why Don't We Do It in the Road" by Paul McCartney.
Why don't we do it in the road?
The beauty is in the simplicity in this one. Just the beauty of, Paul McCartney propositioning somebody to copulate in the middle of a thoroughfare.
Yeah, didn't you see like 2 monkeys banging on the road or something like that in India?
Well, in India, yeah.
It's great. I know it hurt Lennon's feelings that he wasn't on this track.
Yeah, he ends up recording this alone with Ringo Starr. Apparently him and Ringo got to the studio early one day, and he's like, "Hey, I've got this song. You want to do it real quick?" And they knocked it out. And Lennon comes as they're wrapping it up, and he's like, "Oh, what the fuck?"
Out of all the songs that Lennon would love to be on a track like this, I love.
It would suit his vocal style.
I love McCartney's vocals on this though.
It's the closest I think McCartney gets to the Rolling Stones.
He goes fucking ham on this one.
It's a great one. No one will be watching us. Why don't we do it in the road?
It's awesome.
It's great. It's a phenomenal number. Beauty is in the simplicity.
Yeah.
Next one is probably, you're all about Martha, My Dear, and later we've got Mother Nature's Son, which I feel is almost in the same vein. But my favorite, this was really second only to Blackbird in terms of like solo-esque McCartney tracks, is I Will.
This song reminds me of what Wings are going to sound like later.
Yeah. Very, love-oriented. I guess they're all love-oriented.
Yeah, but I mean,
something about this.
This track could have fit perfectly on Band on the Run, in my opinion. I like this song.
Love it.
I think that Mother Nature's Son, just real quick talking about that, I think Mother Nature's Son is like supreme McCartney. But I like this track. I think it's a nice little McCartney number.
Who knows how long I've loved you? Yeah, it's there's something more. There's some genuine heart into it because at this point, he's met his future wife.
Yeah.
And to quote Tommy Wiseau,
oh boy,
my future wife.
Yeah.
And I just undercut any romantic inclinations in that, but it's a beautiful song.
Yeah,
it really is. This is like First Dance level.
Well, yeah, I mean McCartney with his finding his muse, that's always a powerful thing, and he does it on a track like this for sure.
Though disc 1, side 2, and by extension this episode ends on kind of a downer of a song.
Mm-hmm.
The only song, McCartney had been recording songs on his own since yesterday during the Help sessions. This was the only song that John Lennon recorded on his own, though McCartney was in the sound booth, because I think in Anthology you can hear him in between takes, like, oh,
yeah.
It's Julia,
which
is about his mother, because Lennon loses his mother as a teenager by, a drunk driver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Off-duty police officer.
Yeah, hit and run. Which obviously affects him, I think. I think a lot of that tough guy attitude that we get from John Lennon kind of stems from all those hurt, unresolved feelings there, because she had just recently come back into his life because he was mostly raised by his Aunt Mimi.
Mm-hmm.
And, she comes back into his life, and within, months, years, she's killed by this drunk driver, and he's like, it felt, I had her just to lose her all over again, this time definitively.
Yeah. And
so there's definitely this, this undercurrent, like, all the words I say are meaningless, Julia.
Yeah, I mean, I if you want to expand on that whole story, I think the movie Nowhere Boy is really, really good.
With Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Very good film that really is about him coming to know his mother again and then only to lose her and meeting a young Paul McCartney, who also lost his mother young, which they bonded over. I think this is, talking about favorite Lennon tracks, of course, Happiness is a Warm Gun is great and Wild and Crazy, but I love Lennon and McCartney most, even Lennon, when, the more harsh Lennon stuff, I love it most when they have like just the melody and just simplicity, like you're saying, which the White Album really kind of is at its best, is at its simplicity. I think this is a knockout Lennon track. I love Julia. I think his vocals on it, you can hear the sincerity and honesty in his voice on this one. He's not,
it's the most vulnerable he'll ever be as a Beatle.
Yeah, the tough guy facade is down on this one. He lets it go.
Yoko was the first one to let him know it was okay to comfort all those internal demons, all that pain, and it it never manifests itself more fully than it does on Julia.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, it's a very slow, sad song because he's singing about his mom.
Mm-hmm.
He's singing about all the unresolved feelings he has over his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And what a way to close out disc 1.
Yeah.
Especially compared to what opens up disc 2. A fucking birthday number.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I mean, so this is part 1.
Yeah.
Because if we did both sides of the White Album, or both discs of the White Album, it would be a 2-hour episode.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and put a pin in it from here. But we'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be talking more about the Beatles as they're slowly starting to deteriorate.
Wait, hey, I just realized we'll be releasing part 2 during our birthday month.
Yes.
And it starts with birthday. We've done it perfectly, Samuel.
Yes, it was my intention
The whole time.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
It actually comes out. The part 2 comes out the week after our birthday.
Oh, shit.
But there you have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is another episode of Deconstructing the Beatles. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
Keep listening. Welcome to another installment.
It's fucking you know my name.
Welcome to Slathers.
Slathers. Welcome to Slathers. Okay. Okay. Get it out.
Yep.
Get it out.
Yep.
The fuck out of here.
Godhead.
Godhead. Shit.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.